Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so delighted today to be joined by the wonderful Frida Gustavsson to talk all about Netflix's Vikings Valhalla. And I was really interested in a lot of the research that you did for this role. Valkyrie, the Woman of the Viking World, was one of the books that you've kind of cited previously as being a really big influence and a place where you found a lot of details. And how did you kind of narrow down a lot of the research that you were doing to really find the components that were going to be the most useful in terms of forming your character and your performance in the show?
Yeah, that book was absolutely very informative for me in terms of just kind of decipher the society. I think because it is a historical show and Frida is an historical person, even though, what you know about her is so little. For me, it was really informative to kind of try to decipher the society and the societal structures. And because we're in the kind of overlapping age with paganism on the going out and Christianity coming in, Freda is kind of in that window of, where women were still, they still had that possibility to be the masters of their own fate. And it was very informative for me to see that kind of research showing that the decisions I made for the character were based in something real and not just a fabrication of an idea of a Viking woman.
Yeah. And because there wasn't that much information, but little pieces, was there very much about the way that she grew up? Because one of the things that really struck me in terms of watching her and her brother on screen is that it really feels like these are two characters who were raised by their father the same way, that she wasn't treated differently. She has the same strength, the same wit, the same logic in how she approaches things as her brother does.
Yeah, absolutely. We spent a lot of time, me and Sam Corlett, who plays my brother, together with Jeb Stewart, our showrunner, kind of navigating the intricate, relationships with Eric. And having a father of that notoriety, I think in any society is a burden. I feel like Freda's navigated that differently than her brother, perhaps because she is a woman and she doesn't have the same expectations of being this incredibly violent leader. I feel like she kind of picked the raisins from the cookie in terms of the things that she wanted to pass on from him. And yeah, sorry, I lost my track there a little bit.
No, I think that it's really interesting to hear about the relationship with her brother. And did you feel that there was kind of a different scope to her as a character once in the show? Her and her brother are kind of on different paths and different trajectories, and they're not together for a few episodes in the middle, because it kind of felt like she was more introspective and a little bit more internal because he's the person that she shares the most with in the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when Freydis and Leif arrive into the world, they are outsiders, and in a way they can work as a gateway for the viewers into the expansive and ever-changing Viking world. With the cost of actions, I mean, Freydis is quite impulsive in her decisions. In a way, she's almost radicalized in her belief when she arrives. And when she, manages to fulfill her goals, a lot of things are set in motion, which really influences all those people around her that she really loves. And the separation from Leif is something that I found really incredible and very interesting to work with, because she is all of a sudden left in this situation where she was so certain of going out a warrior's death and coming to Valhalla honored and fulfilled in her desires. And after that happens, it's almost like the character arc of a season happens in the first episode, and starting episode 2 as a fresh slate was really interesting. She goes on this, like you say, very spiritual, almost introspective journey. And I really love that about the work with Freydis, is that she is a very physical, very emotional character, maybe not a character per se of big speeches or many words.
Yeah. And obviously you were bringing up her paganism, and so much of the conflict within the show is between paganism and Christianity, and kind of the crux between those two spaces within the Viking community. And we get to see a lot of moments where she's really connecting to her religion. There's the moment where she kind of comes across this community in a temple and steps in there and really just has a space by herself in that moment, which was a great scene to watch. And so what are the facets that you felt came into her as a character because of her staunch beliefs that she's incredibly convicted by?
Well, something that I really found interesting was in the pagan world, you don't have the same type of preconceived ideas about what it is to be a woman. And in that sense, she was a bit more liberated in terms of sexuality and her body and the way that she could bear herself and travel around the world in a pretty unguarded way. Those were aspects I really enjoyed about her spirituality. But also, I mean, she grew up in a very ruthless, brutal world, and her belief is the belief of, an eye for an eye. So in that sense, her spirituality and her belief informed me a lot about how she would react to certain things. Like, she's impulsive, she's driven by, there's a line in the show that I think is great. The great Olaf says, "Revenge is the motive of the heathens." And I don't think there's any line that speaks truer for Freydis, because that is what she's driven by what she really feels is right.
Mm-hmm. And after she's gone through that experience of kind of finding that temple and having a moment of peacefulness, but then being confronted with death within that area as well, there's the moment where she's talking to her brother Leif and talking about how the things that she's seen have really completely changed her, and what was the trajectory and the shift that you wanted to create in her as a character at that point.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. At that point in the story, she has gone through so many cycles of learning to run and then tripping, and she's constantly, experiencing death, at the expense of her. I mean, her decisions causes so many people that she loves, to lose their life. So she also really struggles with the part of accepting being a leader and being a person who carries the torch. I think she's really followed by a lot of guilt, even though she believes her actions were right. Survivor's guilt is strong, and realizing that all of these people have sacrificed the ultimate sacrifice for her, so she could live her truth, is difficult. And at that point in the story, I really wanted to show the complexity of trying to own up to the mantle that's being, passed to you by people you respect, but at the same time feeling like, am I good enough for this? Is this really what's supposed to happen? So it's a decisive period in her life, to say.
Yeah. And with that journey into her kind of finding who she is as a leader and becoming a little bit more comfortable within that as the season goes on, it feels like a lot of that comes from her connection to Jarl, who's a woman who is fearlessly running her own town, hasn't fallen to an attack in 100 years and is incredibly astute at what she does, and also a real warrior, and has all these women who are constantly training for battle and preparing, and then your character goes into that training as well. And so how did you look at the character of Jarl and really look to the attributes that you felt like Freydis would really want to absorb and take into herself?
Yeah, well, Jarl Håkon, she is all the things she say. I mean, works as a great influence and a great mentor for Freydis. Like I said before, when Freydis arrives in the Kattegat, in the kind of wider Viking world, she's almost radicalized in that sense. She lives in a world that's white or black, it's right or wrong, it's death, it's life, it's revenge. And the meeting of the Jarl Håkon, she opens up wider, horizons for her, makes her realize that there are gray zones. You can't categorize everything so hard, because it just doesn't work that way. The world is more complex and has more layers and more texture than that. So it's a difficult path to walk, realizing that everything you grew up believing might not be true. And also the influence of Harold to open a softness in her, an acceptance of other things that she might not agree with. I think they together form a very important bond in opening Freydis to a more softer side of forgiveness and acceptance.
Yeah. And with Jarl as well, Jarl kind of like almost prophesizes Freydis in telling her about a vision that she had, and essentially being like, you're the last daughter, you're the person that I saw in that vision. It wasn't actually me. What did you think that really meant for Freydis as a character, and what did that kind of propel her to do in terms of a lot of the choices that she then makes?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, the kind of latter part of the season is the way that I constructed it. It's a lot for Freydis in terms of accepting where she is. I feel like that's the greater theme of the show, or at least Freydis's arc for the first season is acceptance of where you are and who you are and your circumstances. So in learning that she is this almost chosen one type of person to a lot of people. It's difficult. It's very conflicting. First of all, I mean, you feel honored and you feel seen, which is something that any person in any time would want to be. But it's also terrifying because she realizes that, you know, this is going to come with great sacrifices again for everyone around her that she truly loves. But I think ultimately, Jarl Håkon's opening of Freydis leads her to take certain decisions towards the end that I don't think she would have taken otherwise.
Yeah, no, I really love that arc about her. You know, and you were bringing up her relationship with Harold and how that really gives a softer side. And in terms of your performance and the way that you were shaping her as a character, you know, did that really kind of open up the possibilities in how you could play her as a character? Because it wasn't just about, oh, I'm playing this woman who was really strong and kind of grew into a leadership position. You really also get to acknowledge and play to the softer, more vulnerable side of her as a character. So you get that full spectrum within the way that they've written her in the scripts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that I really wanted to work with and an idea that I found very interesting is when she arrives, you know, she has all of these emotional and physical traumas and scarring. And by solving that, in a sense, it doesn't make it completely go away. And she's still very shielded. I worked with that in a very physical sense of just slowly kind of reshaping the way that she moves and the way, you know, to kind of let her shoulders drop a little bit. She comes and she's almost animalistic in the sense she's very just instinct. And in the meeting of Harold, he manages to break her down in the sense that she can then be accepting of love and to be able to see herself in the way that other people see her. I think for a long time she has chosen not to see certain aspects of herself in order to fulfill her goal of revenge. And ultimately, she's made richer and fuller by the experience of receiving love.
Yeah. And within their relationship as well, you know, it kind of feels like he's the one ready to like move a few steps forward and she's the one kind of holding, you know, just kind of like pausing things a little bit, like, let's just keep things where they are.
Yeah.
What did you kind of feel were her reasons for kind of being the one to like dictate where the space is and having that hesitancy still?
Well, I think the incredibly horrific trauma that she has been a victim of really informed me in terms of who she wanted to be sexually. She wanted to be a person who takes charge. She doesn't want to be held down. She wants to be the active part. And I think that is, you know, of course, a result of this horrific rape that she was victim of. And with that kind of transpiring through the season, it was something we worked a lot with, me and Leo Suter, who plays Harold, and Hannah, the director of the episode 6. We wanted to really portray that difference and the tenderness and that really intimate, romantic thing as the first experience for Freydis. Perhaps it's something she's never experienced before. And we really wanted to show them the duality of her sexuality in that sense.
Yeah. And obviously with the horrific assault that is part of her backstory and part of her past, you know, there's that moment where she reveals her scar on her back to him very early on, which feels like a very vulnerable move. But I was also interested in how for you that informed your character, because that's a huge thing to have gone through what she's gone through and to be carrying that trauma and then to have a physical manifestation of that she can't necessarily see all the time, but is like very aware of and can feel on her body every single day.
Yeah, that was something I spoke a lot with Jeb about, and we wanted that to not just be shown in the first episode and then you forget about it. So it is something we worked with in coming back. And, you know, as a character, I feel like the decisions I made for her in terms of how she's coping with this emotional and physical trauma is that she makes decisions to not have it influence every single decision that she has in her life. It's there, but it's also not something that she's incredibly open with. So in sharing that with Harold, I would say for Fate, it's a much more intimate gesture than just having sex with him. I feel like that's something that it's a very, very personal and very big emotional risk that she takes. And yeah, it was very interesting to play that scene.
Yeah. And with that being one of the things that you and Jeb were talking about before filming, because this show was kind of greenlit for like the first 3 seasons up front, was he able to give you a lot more of a scope in terms of your character's arc, or kind of how much did you want to know that was really useful going into shooting those first few episodes even?
Well, Jeb is incredible. Jeb is one of the best storytellers I've ever had the pleasure of meeting and talking to in my life. And when you go into his office and you ask him one little question, and then it's like 5 hours later, we're like, yeah, 40 years later, this happens. And I'm just like making notes, trying to like play catch up. But for me, I wanted to have a broad kind of scope of where we were going. But the way that I like to work, I don't want to constantly be reminding myself that, oh, this is going to happen. I like to enter every day and every scene with, an openness and kind of exploring what happens. So we spent a lot of time just prepping what, informs her of her decisions. Why is she very impulsive? Why is she very, quick? Why is she very instinctual? And then I like to discover the things as we go along.
And going back to something that you were saying before about some of her movement and kind of those moments where she's skulking around people with kind of a very animal-like instinct, when you look at her fighting, that's really a part of it too. There's moments when she knows that she can take a second and she kind of wants to observe everything around her and kind of plan her next move. And so how did you set about figuring out what is her movement? What is the way that she fights from her personality within the show, particularly because before she goes through training, it's very much hand-to-hand combat for her, and it's just about the tools that she has and the emotion that it stems from.
Yeah, that's something that I work together with our incredible stunt performers team. They're so great at shaping, the choreography and really identifying the different styles of Freydis and Leif and Harold. But something that I was, really, that was really important for me to feel is that she grew up in a very harsh environment where you hunt for your own food. You have to be incredibly light and quick because you're dealing with things that you can't communicate with. So when you meet Freydis in the beginning, she moves like a hunter. She moves, like I said, almost in an animalistic way. And then we worked on during the season when she learns how to properly fight, to be more upright, to even, reshape the muscles that I had on my body to be able to fight in a more upright, a more correct, trained way. So that was something that was very on the, top of our minds when we created the kind of movements that Freydis would have.
Mm-hmm. And what was kind of, because you do a lot of your own stunts in the show as well. And when you look at the weaponry that you're fighting with, once she goes through that training, it just looks extraordinarily heavy as well, because it's, a giant wooden shield, the swords are incredibly weighted, and how did you kind of set about training with all of the weaponry, with the weight involved, and kind of making sure that it still had that fluidity of movement and this felt like a completely natural thing to your character?
Well, we started just kind of learning how to move. It's like dancing, I got my little knife in the beginning. That was the first weapon. The first fight we worked on was the Berserker fight, which is the one in episode 3, which I love the way that it turned out. I feel like that was very instinctual and very raw. And then, as Freydis, I got to learn together with Freydis, which was really helpful for me because in the first couple of months of shooting, it was only knuckles, it was strangling, it was my little knife and just, trying to survive. And then as the story and the season progressed, I got to learn about all of these difficult and different weapons. So it was a learning together, which was really interesting.
And jumping into kind of talking about the last episode a little bit, because there's some great combat within that final episode. I was interested in just hearing a little bit about shooting the scene where it's just like all of the cast on set and it's that massive fight sequence and it's kind of the culmination of the series in terms of battles, because the camera is kind of going around and capturing every single character, every single intricacy. And so I imagine that it was a really, really intense shoot in order to be able to get all of that.
Yeah, we did like the war week and it was so intense. We're filming in Ireland and usually the weather is not amazing, but this week was just so sunny and it felt so prophetic in a way, that it was so, beautiful blue skies, and you're there in your armor, and you're ready to fight, and all you could see was the enemy standing right there in sunshine. And it was so informative of what it must feel like to be in close combat with people. And so we had a huge war week, and I filmed my big fight with Jarl Kåre in a day. It's a very intense day. You do the fight so many times. You wear this incredibly heavy armor. It's a pretty long fight, and we do all of our own stunts. So it's it's a big week, and you're bruised everywhere when it's finished. But it was really interesting to hear that they were shooting at the same time, Sam's fight, and they're shooting Leo's fight at a different stage. So we could all really amp up that energy and have like that day as like a focal day and just aim for that. And then it was just the biggest release of emotions.
And you were bringing up kind of the one-on-one moment that she gets to have with Cora in that episode as well, and that's a really, really great sequence, because again, it's just the culmination of everything that your character's been through the entire season really comes into play within that combat. And I heard that was something that you were all talking about and working on very intricately in the lead up, even to the point where you were kind of practicing it in the hotel and people were like, what's happening over in the corner?
Yeah.
What were kind of some of the key details that you all really wanted to make sure that you had mapped out in terms of the character interactions between the two of them and some of the moves before you got onto set to film it?
Well, it was difficult for me because Asbjørn, who plays Jarl Kåre, is one of the nicest, loveliest men ever. But in my head, I love to stay in my bubble. And I was like, I'm not going to be nice to him. I'm not going to talk to him. I'm going to stay away from him. And but what we really wanted to show was the difference of, he is on the other spectrum of being radicalized in his belief, and Freydis is on the other side. And we wanted to show the extreme differences in the characters, where Freydis is impulsive, where she refuses to bow down, she refuses to give up, and she will, go until the very end. The way that she fights is, like we said before, animalistic. And on the other hand, you have Kåre, who fights with two hands. He's way more controlled. He's very poised. He's that type of like almost monk-like laser focus, where Freydis is just trying to, find ends. So I think that was something that we worked a lot with, finding the different kind of patterns of moving, finding our different paces. And then we're both really, really tall. So we had to work a lot in appearing to be incredibly close, but at the same time being far away so we wouldn't actually hit each other, which we unfortunately did a couple of times.
And you were mentioning some of the costumes earlier, and I mean, they look extraordinarily heavy, and there's a lot of handcrafted costumes throughout the series as well. And I love the fact that we get to see Freydis, both in kind of her full armor, and then moments where she's in kind of like much softer materials, particularly when it's about her connecting with her religion and connecting with her paganism as well. And so how did those aspects help you, particularly in finding details of her as a character by putting on kind of like that external armor, or even just the other costumes?
Yeah, I mean, we have the most incredible costume department, Susan, and everyone just have created every single thing you see Freydis wear is just handmade. And when she arrives, we wanted the Greenlanders to really stand out. So they have these seal skins, the kind of polar bear fur in different colors and shades than everyone. And through episode 2 and 3, you can see her assimilate into the Viking world wearing, the classical green type of, softer tunic. And I really love the whole Uppsala experience. We wanted it to feel almost dreamlike, as in, was she actually there? Is this a fictive of her imagination? And, that white, the purity, we wanted to reflect her, the pureness of her belief, the purity in that. And I just have to say, I think my armor is one of the most incredible pieces of clothing or things that I have ever worn in my life. And it is the most heavy. It's the heaviest out of anyone's armor. The boys will not, they're not going to say that, but it actually is. And it just informs you so much about how it is to fight in it. It's very restrictive, and you need to constantly go against your impulse of just stopping. So it's a great carrot to have in front of you when you're fighting, to just having to really protect yourself with the shield or having to really reach for something. And when you get knocked down, there's very little acting involved in the fights, because when you're knocked down, it takes a lot to get back up on your feet, because it is very heavy.
Was there an incredible amount of intricacy in working with the hair and makeup department as well? Because I love the fact that it's very authentic. You know, it's like, okay, Freydis's hair is braided, but clearly she hasn't brushed it in forever. She hasn't been able to wash herself. And so the crusted blood has been on her for 3 days, but now she's at Harold's and she's had a bath. So like now she's cleaner. And like the intricacy in terms of just like tracking and details, and the details that they add for the weathering as well. You know, we really get to see those moments where you've been out in the elements and we feel like you just haven't even been in any shade. And so I was interested in the detailing of all of those aspects.
Yeah, we worked very closely, me and Tom, our makeup designer, to really have that weathered feel. I mean, for me, it was incredibly important to come into this and to, as a woman in the show, being able to have the same amount of breakdown. It may sound superficial, but for me, it was very important that, Freydis wouldn't stand out in terms of that she would be less weathered or less bloody or, less muddy. So that was something that was the key word for us, was authentic. We wanted it to be real. We wanted it to be raw. And also when you look at like the class aspect of society, where Freydis, she sleeps kind of on the floor with Jarl Håkon. She doesn't have servants. I mean, you see Jarl Håkon and she got little gold things in her hair, and, she's representing her town and her people. So of course she needs to look representative. And then you have Queen Emma, on the other hand, who's the wealthiest woman in Europe, and she's the Queen of England. Of course, she's going to be perfectly poised and clean. And for Freydis, it's just she doesn't care about that. For me, that was great. I'm very happy with the end result, because I feel like it really shows who Freydis is, and she's not, informed about the way she looks. She just acts on her instincts.
No, I really loved that authenticity and the detailing as well. And then lastly, I was interested in some of the attributes that your kind of incredible career in modeling really have given you as an actor, because, I've heard you describe how it gave you a lot of time to really think about the expression on your face and, even just coming onto set and kind of having already an astute awareness of light and camera and placement and how you're being captured in the story that you're telling. How have you found that a lot of the tools and attributes and skills that you developed working in modeling have really, really kind of served you in a way where you're not necessarily having to think as consciously about some of those external details, and you can really just focus even more on character?
Yeah, I think what you said is absolutely true. I feel like all of those years just working and being hyper aware, but at the same time being able to completely dissociate yourself to your face and your body really helped. I feel like the main objective of any actor is to go in and not be aware, and to be in the moment and discovering things. And I feel like all of those years working, very closely with your face, very closely with your body, has really helped me in terms of being able to not be conscious about that. And it's really nice when you don't have to feel that you're constantly aware of everything that's happening around you. It's just some kind of like impulse that, in the back of your head going, oh yeah, that's a little nice light bounces there. Let's do this a little bit. But also I feel like it gave me a really great understanding of working with my body and, shaping things in terms of the physicality and the way I've worked with movement throughout my career as a model. I feel like that really was really helpful in for this.
No, I think that's really fantastic. And it's so great to hear those details as well as everything on the show. Congratulations on such a great first season. And thank you so much for sharing all of this. Really appreciate it, Frida.
Oh, thank you so much. It was absolutely my pleasure.